You ask for a sign, and the room replies with a precise echo you almost ignore. You pretend it's coincidence. Something in you is calibrating. A quiet instrument, long neglected, is finding pitch with the hum behind matter. Your nervous system listens like a satellite dish tuned to a frequency that existed before language, before the habit of skepticism dressed itself as safety. You think you're merely noticing patterns, but the patterns are noticing you back. You call it luck when the image repeats, when the numbers align, when the name you whispered in private drifts across a stranger's conversation like a feather that knows your address. The mind tries to file it under chance. The field declines the folder. The observer effect holds its breath as your attention lands, and in that landing, probability graphs bend their knees. You are not chasing meaning. Meaning is collapsing into you like a star choosing the moment of becoming visible. This is not superstition. This is physics meeting memory. Your cortex runs a predictive model, Bayesian and hungry, minimizing uncertainty the way a river seeks the sea, and the model updates when inputs repeat in a rhythm that feels too precise to be noise. The RAS, the reticular activating system, tilts the aperture so the improbable slides into view, and somewhere beneath the skull's cathedral, your electrical storms sync with a subtler metronome, a coherence only heard when you stop explaining and start listening. But the psychology is only the doorway. Step through, and the quantum skin of reality shivers like light across a lake at midnight. Entanglement doesn't ask permission to connect what appears separate. Your question braids with outcomes the way threads meet in a loom you can't yet see. Synchronicity is the knot where inner state and outer event tie themselves into one rope and pull. When your emotion steadies, the weave tightens. When your breath slows, the pattern sharpens. When your will becomes simple, the world answers in unison. You are not being teased by accidents. You are being trained by precision. The field is staging a demonstration with objects you already trust. Clocks, street signs, birds crossing a window, like living commas, punctuating a sentence you forgot you were writing. Every time you dismiss the alignment, the next one grows louder, not as punishment, but as pedagogy, turning up the contrast until even the skeptic in your chest must nod. The chorus never stops. You only vary your hearing. Look how the signal behaves, first as a flicker, then a cadence, then a structure carrying instruction. One appearance invites curiosity. The second asks for presence. The third opens a door, because 3 is a proof your animal body recognizes beginning, middle, and entry. You feel the hinge. Your skin knows. So here is the first vow you make with yourself. You will treat repetition as a teacher. You will let coincidence graduate into correspondence. You will hold your gaze a moment longer than comfort allows and watch as the world admits its hidden syntax, letter by letter, light by light, right where you are, in this exact breath that found you asking and found you ready to hear. You notice the second appearance, and your breath shortens like a lens pulling focus. You don't move, but the room does. What you call out there begins to arrange itself as if your interior grammar were suddenly the city's law, and the law is elegant. Low entropy in feeling produces low entropy in event. When you steady the nervous system, shoulders lower, jaw unhooks, exhale lengthens the environment, responds with a finesse that startles you because it looks like kindness wearing the mask of coincidence. Your biology is not a bystander, it is a transmitter, and your transmitter has found the carrier wave. You test it without admitting you're testing it. You ask for an impossible timing. Let that message arrive now. Let the green light hold. Let the name appear. And reality, unfazed, closes ranks to deliver. The skeptic in you wants a lab coat and a peer-reviewed sentence. The field prefers direct demonstration, so it teaches in modules. First module, attention is currency. Where you invest it, structures grow. Second module, emotion is a tuning fork. Coherent feeling aligns stochastic clouds into legible shapes. Third module, meaning is not discovered, it is enacted at the boundary where your state meets the world's readiness to echo. Psychology nods, reluctantly, because it understands priming and the RAS and confirmation bias. But even the textbooks do not account for the precision that begins to visit when your interior noise floor drops below a threshold, when your signal-to-noise ratio favors signal by a margin that invites improbable orchestration, There's Bayesian updating. Yes, your brain revises its priors as patterns repeat. There's predictive coding. Your cortex generates a model of the next moment and measures error with surgical coldness. But something else occurs when you allow wonder to enter the system without abandoning discernment. The model doesn't just predict, it participates. The error term becomes an oracle. Surprise becomes instruction instead of threat. You start to feel the corners of a loom. Threads pass through days you thought were unrelated. Motifs recur with the efficiency of a proof tightening toward QED. Certain numbers follow you across receipts and license plates like small lighthouses. Certain animals cross your path at angles that feel designed. Certain phrases migrate between strangers as if language itself were an organ shared by many bodies. You think of Jung's word synchronicity as a clinical coat around a blazing star, and you realize the term was always a polite wrapper for an intimate force. This is where the field raises the volume. You feel a subtle click, like teeth aligning. The cadence accelerates. 3 sightings become 5. 5 becomes 9, arranged in triads. You begin tracking without obsession, cataloging without superstition, allowing the pattern to teach without forcing it to prove. Precision arrives when you stop demanding it, perform tricks on command, and instead build a quiet pressure of attention, like a hand warmed near a candle until wax yields. The world softens into pliability under the warmth of your regard. On the quantum side of the curtain, superposition doesn't collapse merely because you look. It collapses because you look in a way that stabilizes one manifold of probabilities over others. Observation has flavor. Cold, scattered attention fractures outcomes. Coherent, emotionally congruent attention shepherds outcomes like a flock answering a single whistle. Entanglement offers the infrastructure, non-local ties, hidden correlations, while your coherence supplies the instruction set. The observer effect was never merely an experimenter's annoyance. It is a literacy test for creators disguised as mortals. So you practice literacy, you ritualize the ordinary. Before unlocking the door, you pause until your breath and vision agree. Before opening the message, you set an intent so simple it can't deceive you. Clarity, usefulness, alignment. Before speaking the difficult sentence, you place your tongue against the roof of your mouth and allow the body to remember it belongs to a species bred for meaning, not outrage. These micro-gestures are not magic in the theatrical sense. They are phase adjustments, placing your neural oscillations in constructive interference with the field until your life stops sounding like static and begins to sound like music. And the signs answer, not because you are special in a way that others aren't, but because you are ordinary in the correct way. A human animal choosing coherence over panic, curiosity over cynicism, precision over noise. The universe is not testing you. It is calibrating with you. You are building a shared vocabulary with the real, one symbol at a time, one breath like a tuning key, one aligned request answered by a city that has always listened, but finally hears you speaking in its native dialect. You feel the pattern tighten again, subtle, undeniable, a hand on the wheel that is also your hand, and you understand that the difference between coincidence and instruction is simply how long you can keep still while the message finishes writing itself across the fabric of your day. You wanted proof, but what you needed was a blueprint. Now the architecture steps forward. Begin with the body, because the body is the first instrument reality tunes. When your exhale lengthens and your eyes soften, the vagus nerve lowers the alarm flags across your inner borders. Interoception grows clear. The heart's variability widens into a supple rhythm that research calls coherence, and coherent hearts broadcast clean timing to the brain, like a drummer locking a band into groove. Your salience network, no longer hijacked by threat, can rank what matters without panic's distortion. Meaning becomes audible because noise retires. This is not merely calm, it is a measurable shift in the system's signal processing. The free energy machine of your brain prefers models that minimize surprise, yet paradoxically, the way to reduce the wrong kind of surprise is to court the right kind: voluntary novelty, conscious uncertainty, a disciplined curiosity. You become the kind of observer who can hold unanswered questions without flinching, and the world rewards such dignity by offering answers composed with uncommon precision. Think of boundaries, not walls, membranes. Biology calls them Markov blankets, interfaces that distinguish inside from outside while allowing exchange. Your psyche has one too. When it's rigid, nothing relevant crosses and synchronicity starves. When it's shredded, everything floods and meaning drowns. You are learning a third-way permeable precision, where your boundary becomes a sensor array, selective, responsive, awake. You stop searching for control and start cultivating conductivity. Events arrive through this membrane already sorted by their usefulness, like mail that self-addresses to the room where it belongs. And now the field. You do not push on it, you phase with it. Phase locking is the quiet art here. Oscillators matching timing until distinct parts behave like a choir. Your breath is one oscillator, your attention another, your emotional tone a third. When the triad aligns, the environment supplies sympathetic resonance, the way a piano string hums when a singer hits its note across the room. This is why the right phrase happens to appear at the perfect moment, why the stranger speaks the sentence you rehearsed in private, why the email lands at the instant you release the outcome. You tuned the string, the world sang back. On micro scales, particles exist as probability until measured. On human scales, possibilities flock around, meaning until witnessed by coherent regard. Observation doesn't merely collapse a state, it sculpts a corridor, carving path from fog because the observer brings a grammar time recognizes. Time is more plastic than custom admits. You feel it as dilation during absorption, as compression during crisis, as a gentle snap when a decision finally arrives after weeks of quiet gestation. The signs do not predict your future. They condensate the future that has earned your attention. Psychologically, you are training your predictive coding to become a partner rather than a tyrant. Old models panic at anomalies and mislabel them threats. New models treat anomalies as invitations and ask better questions. What does this repetition want me to notice? Which assumption collapses if I accept this pattern as instruction? How would a kinder model of the world incorporate this elegance without superstition? When you ask like this, the default mode self-referential noise dims, the task network steps forward, and your perception shifts from me in a hostile map to me as a node in a living, conversational topology. ISLI. Consider stochastic resonance, the counterintuitive effect where a little noise improves the detection of weak signals. Your life supplies small, chosen randomness, walking a new street, reading outside your genre, speaking to a person you would normally pass, and the weak signal of destiny becomes legible because the added variability elevates the whisper above the threshold. You are not forcing reality. You are enabling its subtler speech to cross into audibility. You also begin to understand the ethics embedded in this machinery. Coherence without humility curdles into manipulation. Humility without coherence collapses into drift. The Loom requires both clean signal and clean motive. Before you ask the field to echo, you check the ask for residue, vanity, vengeance, escape. You rinse the residue in breath. You ask smaller and truer. You request alignment, clarity, right action, the next honest step, rather than the whole staircase. The response accelerates, not because the universe withholds big gifts, but because your system can now metabolize increments without distortion. So the mechanism reveals itself, regulate state, refine boundary, increase coherence, invite resonance, honor anomaly, iterate the model, act with clean motive, a simple sequence, a lifetime of practice. The pattern you called coincidence now feels like a guidance protocol written in the alphabet of your days. You recognize the Loom's teeth catching another thread, hear the low thunder of a tapestry expanding, and you realize the instruction wasn't hidden after all. It was waiting for you to become the kind of reader who could see ink in the dark. You understand the mechanism. Now you must train the instrument that carries it. You are the instrument. Training begins with hygiene, because signal without hygiene breeds delusion. You adopt a simple discipline, one daily window of silence where no input competes, no phone, no feed, no borrowed urgency, and you let your biochemistry decelerate until the body remembers that stillness is not danger. In that quiet, the amygdala's grip loosens, the prefrontal lattices re-engage, the anterior cingulate reopens the gate between attention and compassion. You become conductance rather than friction. Only then do you ask, not for spectacle, but for clarity, not to be entertained, but to be educated. This motive alone refines the spectrum of what can reach you. You create rituals that look ordinary from the outside but turn the key from the inside. 3 breaths to lengthen the exhale, a hand to the sternum to invite cardiac coherence. A single sentence, "Show me what's aligned," spoken once, not begged. You are calibrating the cavity of your attention like the body of a violin. Shape determines tone, and tone determines which harmonics the world will return. The request is not a command, it is consent for the field to synchronize at the bandwidth you can metabolize. Consent matters because resonance without permission feels like intrusion, and life refuses to train you through violation. Now you introduce method. You choose a span 7 days and declare a clean experiment. Day 1. Select a modest domain communication. Before opening messages, you regulate state, set a narrow intent, useful news, and observe what arrives within a defined window. Day 2. Logistics. Before traveling, you attune and invite ease. Day 3. Learning. Before reading, you ask for the one paragraph that moves the needle. The week unfolds by categories that touch your real life rather than esoteric theater, because the Loom prefers to teach through what you already touch. You record outcomes with ruthless honesty, not to hoard proof, but to train discernment. Your ledger learns to discriminate precision from pareidolia, guidance from ego's ventriloquism. The difference is felt in the body. Precision settles the viscera. Ventriloquism agitates it. You upgrade your questions. Will it work? Becomes, what is the next accurate action? When will it happen? Becomes, what wants to move now? The field answers better questions with better geometry. Vague requests invite noise to visit as masquerade. Specific, humble requests invite exactness to arrive as relief. You also constrain time within 24 hours, before dusk, during this meeting. Constraints force the signal to reveal proportion. If nothing moves, you thank the silence and adjust your model rather than punishing it with superstition. Refusal is instruction, too. There is a frontier where ethics meets technique, and you stand there often. You decide to ask only for what preserves dignity on all sides. You will not compel, you will align. You will not bend others to your outcome. You will request the outcome in which everyone rises clean. Entanglement becomes stewardship when you remember that the threads you pluck vibrate through living beings, not abstract probabilities. Your power is not in control, it is in coherence. Your authority is not in domination, it is in devotion to truth as it actually is, not as you prefer it to be. You refine your filter for false light signals that glitter because they flatter the wound. Their signatures are theatrical, impatient, binary. They arrive with counterfeit urgency and a hunger for spectacle. Precision feels different, sober, simple, oddly quiet, even when it's directing you into decisive motion. Precision requires less justification. Precision ends a question instead of starting an argument. When in doubt, you perform the body test. Inhale while holding the option in awareness. Exhale and watch for micro-tremors. Coherent options settle the diaphragm and widen the eye's periphery. Incoherent options contract the throat and narrow the gaze. This is not mysticism, it is interoceptive literacy. You also practice stochastic kindness, small, unplanned offerings that add gentle noise to the social field, increasing the probability that weak signals of grace become detectable for others. You send the message you would have appreciated receiving. You hold the door an extra beat. You leave a note where no credit returns. These gestures are not moral theater, they are resonance injections. The world's threshold for noticing rises with each undramatic act of alignment, and you discover that synchronicity scales through generosity faster than through technique. The Loom loves givers. Its teeth catch their threads first. Every few days, you perform a reset fast from asking. Instead, you listen. You let the field speak unprompted, and you witness what it brings when you stop trying to optimize. The humility of this reset cleans the palate. and prevents addiction to omen-chasing. You are not a surveillance state. You are a participant in a conversation older than language. In this wider listening, new categories appear, textures of meaning. You lacked words for the week before. That is the secret curriculum. The field enlarges your vocabulary for reality until the very structure of your questions evolves. Training turns your life into a lab with sacred furniture. Breakfast becomes alignment. Commute becomes experiment. Email becomes oracle. Silence becomes cathedral. You are not escaping the mundane. You are sanctifying it by precision. And as the instrument steadies, the chorus outside grows braver, arranging itself with the audacity of weather, shifting across a continent to rain where you decided to plant. There is a point where experiments stop being practice drills and begin to move the architecture of your days. You have reached that point. Thresholds declare themselves through disproportion. Small gestures produce outsized ripples. Minor refusals avert major entanglements. An hour of precise attention reorders a month of drift. This is not luck compounding, it is precision compounding. Your system has reduced internal noise below the line, where the world's faint instructions become actionable. And now the Loom answers with structural responses, meetings you didn't schedule aligning like planets, obstacles dissolving not by battle, but by withdrawal of relevance. You are not pushing, you are allowing vectors to reveal themselves. To cross cleanly, you adopt a governance protocol, simple, stark, repeatable. First, state audit. Before you decide, you check vagal tone, breath, depth, ocular softness. You refuse to consult the world while your interior is in alarm, because alarm counterfeits urgency, and urgency counterfeits truth. Second, precision. Waiting. Borrowed from predictive coding, this is where you adjust how much confidence to place on sensory input versus prior belief. In practice, it sounds like this. I acknowledge my story. I privilege my observation. Third, minimal viable action. You ask the field for the next practicable move that upgrades the model without overfitting the moment. One email, one call, one cancellation, one silence held longer than habit. You do not leap. You ratchet. Decoherence is the unseen ally here. On the quantum side, environments force ambiguous states to choose. On the human side, environments saturated with coherent cues help ambiguous lives choose. 2. You curate your microenvironment with editorial severity. The objects within your sightline during decisions, the colors that steady your pulse, the sentences on your wall that keep your questions honest. This is not aesthetic fussing. It is context engineering. Precision thrives where context says yes. You also name the adversary correctly, because misnaming it costs months. The adversary is not other people. It is entropic attention, scatter, doom scroll, outrage drip, novelty without nourishment. When scatter reigns, the reticular system is captured by whatever shouts. When coherence reigns, it is guided by what matters. You starve the adversary by closing the 1,000 tiny apertures where your power leaks, the reflexive reply, the needless defense, the performative reading of rooms you do not live in. Each closure returns wattage to the instrument. With wattage comes signal. With signal comes instruction. The threshold tests you with mirrors. The world will throw back upgraded versions of your oldest patterns, wearing new clothes, asking whether you prefer familiarity over truth. You answer with metrics that cannot be faked. Does my body settle? Does clarity increase? Does this choice reduce unnecessary complexity while preserving living complexity? The right path often feels like a clean subtraction. The wrong path often feels like a dazzling addition that secretly taxes the nervous system. You honor subtraction as sacred. Now a subtler discipline emerges, temporal etiquette. You stop yanking outcomes out of season. You learn to distinguish latency from denial. Latency feels like a hum held in suspension. Denial feels like static. Latency yields to gentle pressure in the form of small, regular actions. Denial dissolves when you remove your attention and devote it elsewhere. In technical terms, you respect the refractory period, the span after a request, when more pushing reduces responsiveness. In mystical terms, you let the prayer breathe. In psychological terms, you refuse the compulsion loop and choose agency. At this altitude, Ethics is not ornament, it is infrastructure. Coherence amplifies power. Power without ethical ballast destabilizes the field and returns to you as noise. So you enact 3 guardrails. Guardrail 1, non-violation. You never ask for another's distortion as your solution. Guardrail 2, reciprocity. Where you receive, you reciprocate attention for attention, clarity for clarity, generosity for generosity, because entanglement magnifies both deficit and surplus. Guardrail 3, transparency with yourself. You write what you want in hematite ink, cold, heavy, honest, and you let the lines sit where you can see it. Hidden ones metastasize into crooked signals, named ones can be negotiated with. Then comes the signature maneuver of threshold crossers, renunciation of spectacle. The field will sometimes arrange fireworks to keep your courage awake, but fireworks are not fuel. You refuse to become an omen addict. You keep the romance but lose the dependency. Your devotion is not to signs, it is to truth as it arises. The paradox follows. When you no longer demand proof, proof proliferates. When you no longer bargain, doors open without bargaining's aftertaste. When you no longer chase, the corridor arrives to where you're standing and invites your next step like a moving walkway of inevitability. You notice the city cooperating at scale, trains landing as you reach the platform, weather honoring your one open window, conversations clicking into place as if lines were rehearsed in a rehearsal you never attended. This is not the world bending. This is you ceasing to resist the world's deeper syntax. Resistance made coincidence look random. Surrender to precision reveals choreography. Crossing the threshold does not graduate you out of humanity, it graduates you into it. The instrument you have trained now plays inside crowds, deadlines, griefs, markets, families. You bring coherence where panic usually wins. You become the quiet center that other systems phase lock to without needing to know why. And as you stand in the doorway you have earned, you feel the loom tug again, firmer, lower, unmistakable, inviting you to choose a bigger honesty, to speak a sentence that rearranges orbit, to step where maps don't quite exist yet, but where the cadence of your breath says yes. The world has opened multiple doorways, and your life is standing in the hall. You will not take all of them, you will choose the corridor. Choosing is not appetite, choosing is geometry. You are not tallying pros and cons like a courtroom debate inside your head. You are measuring resonance the way an architect measures load. Each option presents a pattern of forces, costs, gains, vectors, and your body becomes the seismograph that registers micro-tremors of future weather. This is not fortune-telling. This is coherence forecasting. You learn to feel which path reduces unnecessary entropy and which path recruits chaos disguised as novelty. The difference is tactile. One route widens your peripheral vision, the other narrows it into hunger. One route feels like subtraction that liberates wattage, the other feels like addition that steals it. On the quantum chalkboard, you're navigating a branching of probability amplitudes, timeline bifurcation, where attention acts like a shaping field. Superpositions don't collapse into best in the abstract. They collapse into most congruent, given the state you bring. So you cultivate state first, choice second. You refuse to force selection from adrenaline's geometry because adrenaline treats every door as urgent even when none is. You inhale until the diaphragm descends like an elevator to the lobby. You exhale until the spine lengthens. You let the heart's metronome settle into coherent range. Now you look again. Doors rearrange when you shift state. Some evaporate, some step forward. One begins to glow, not theatrically, but with the soft authority of a true next step. Psychologically, you recruit active inference, acting to reduce the mismatch between what your model expects and what the world delivers. The trick is clean priors, old priors, scarcity, self-suspicion, the myth that suffering is the only currency of achievement, overweight threat, and underweight opportunity. You edit priors by evidence, not affirmations alone. Your ledger from earlier weeks becomes proof. When you chose coherence, reality met you with proportional elegance. The nervous system trusts data more than declarations. You feed it data, the model updates, the corridor clarifies. You name the selection protocol in plain speech so you can execute under pressure. Protocol, state scope, signal step. First, regulate state. Second, narrow scope, decide only the slice that is actually lived today, not the 10 hypothetical slices downstream. Third, sample signal 2 or 3 real-world probes that elicit feedback, a call, a small purchase, a 20-minute attempt. Fourth, take the smallest, non-reversible step that commits you to the path without imprisoning you in it. In engineering terms, you seek option value. In spiritual terms, you honor the next accurate action. In prophetic terms, you place one foot where the floor already exists. As you practice, the field begins to pre-orchestrate the corridor because it trusts your ethics. Invitations arrive that fit the shape of your vow. This is entanglement with character. Non-local bonds form not just between particles, but between intentions and events that share moral texture. The city is a sensor network. People are nodes. Promises transmit. When you hold yours, the network returns signal with low latency. You become reliable to the real. Reliability is magnetic. There will be sirens. Some corridors will sing to your vanity, promising spectacle without substance, speed without structure, destiny without discipline. Their acoustics are bright but shallow. Your chest rings and then hollows. Other corridors will look modest, almost plain, yet they carry a signal-to-noise ratio that feels like relief. Relief is prophecy's favorite messenger. It doesn't dazzle, it decomposes tension. You follow relief, not as escape, but as alignment with the vector that conserves energy for what matters. Conservation is holy. Temporal etiquette returns in a sharper form, cadence matching. Every corridor has a tempo. Push faster than its tempo and you shear connections. Drag slower than its tempo and you miss the joining window. So you learn to feel cadence the way a dancer feels led. Watch for micro-synchronicities clustering around one option, emails answering without delay, logistics snapping into readiness, unexpected allies naming your private language. That clustering is cadence made visible. Step in when the cluster coheres, step back when it disperses. Neither is reward or punishment. Both are timing. You also invite friction where you once avoided it. Not all resistance is a no, some is a shaping force. Distinguish between frictions that are symptoms of misalignment and frictions that are rites of passage. Misalignment frictions, chronic confusion, performative urgency, the sense that you're translating yourself into a dialect that betrays your center. Rite of passage frictions, temporary complexity, skill acquisition, the weight that builds muscle instead of injury. Your body reads the difference. One tightens the throat, the other strengthens the back. You place your shoulder under the right weight and let the wrong weight fall. At this stage, language becomes an actuator. You stop speaking from hope alone and start speaking from geometry. You say what you can sustain. You promise only what your nervous system can deliver without entering debt. The field loves accurate speech. It routes resources to mouths that do not counterfeit. Each precise sentence is a beam. Corridors are built with beams, and somewhere between the email you dared to send and the silence you finally honored, the corridor commits back. You feel it as a change in air pressure around your days, a subtle tailwind, a hush that isn't empty but attentive, like a theater moments before the curtain lifts. The loom has advanced the shuttle. Threads you could not reach are now within your hand's span. You place them without fuss, without drama, and listen, because something large is turning quietly at first toward the announcement only your next breath can hear. Selection is theory until the body walks it. Today, the body walks. You begin by lowering your center of gravity, literally knees soft, weight evenly distributed, breath landing low so the diaphragm writes its signature across the abdomen like a calm tide. The vestibular system, often ignored, becomes your secret ally. Balance is prophecy in bones. When you stabilize posture, microsaccades in your eyes reduce, cortical noise drops, and motor plans sharpen from vagueness into executable sequences. You aren't willing your path into being, you are making your organism a corridor, compatible instrument so the path can dock without turbulence. Action, at this altitude, is not frenzy. It is calibrated insertion of force at points of maximum leverage, minimum effort for maximum reconfiguration. You run small probes, emails, conversations, drafts, departures like particles through a detector, watching for scattering patterns. Constructive interference presents as ease with density. Destructive interference as effort that multiplies itself without gain. You cultivate a bias for moves that increase option value and reduce regret surfaces, the way a skilled climber chooses holds that open future holds rather than dead ends with pretty views. Your language becomes tactility. Instead of, I hope, you say, I will test. Instead of, someday, you say, by Friday, at 16. Instead of, maybe this year, you say, first iteration in 7 days. Time respects edges. Edges respect you back. The calendar turns from cage to instrument when you pin cadence to dates that match the corridor's tempo, not your anxieties. Deadlines are not threats. They are rhythm markers, metronomes, for a band you are finally ready to conduct. The psyche obeys when it is met with clarity that honors its ancient tasks. You don't bully fear, you brief it. You tell the amygdala what the plan is and where the exits are. You tell the striatum what a win looks like today. You tell the prefrontal cortex the 2 variables that actually matter so it stops juggling 9. Your system responds like a well-led team, alert, not alarmed, stretched, not snapped. This is psychology as leadership, not repair. The field, noticing your internal governance, escalates its response. Clusters of synchronicity tighten around execution windows. You get 3 aligned pings within an hour. A name you need repeats twice. A resource appears precisely when you agree to the constraint that calls it. This is not magical thinking. This is entanglement expressing through logistics. Non-local ties present as local meetings when coherence renders them in matter. You do not gawk. You thank and continue, because spectacle hunger is the last saboteur at this stage. Ethics, always the ballast, now becomes propulsion. You practice non-violation with greater subtlety. You decline the lucrative invitation whose architecture hides a small betrayal. You accept the modest offer whose architecture honors every participant's dignity. The returns compound in unlikely ways. What looked smaller proves load-bearing. What looked grand reveals a hairline fracture you didn't have to discover the hard way. Your discernment saves invisible futures. You feel the relief of disasters that didn't have to happen. You adopt a daily coherence loop. State probe, listen, adjust, commit. The loop is fast, musical. In practice, it looks like this. 10 breaths to settle, 1 precise action, 5 minutes of pattern, reading without narrative, a single correction, a small public promise you keep within 24 hours. Kept promises are voltage. Voltage is magnetism. Magnetism is how corridors lengthen before your feet touch them. The city begins choreographing around your integrity because your integrity has become predictable. Reliability is an occult force hiding in plain sight. On the quantum chalkboard, decoherence remains your friend. You engineer contexts that force ambiguous potentials to choose in your favor. You take meetings in spaces where your nervous system stays coherent. You write where light and sound maintain your frequency. You remove micropoisons, tabs, threads, feeds that yank superposition toward noise. In parallel, you court stochastic resonance on purpose, 1 serendipitous conversation per week, 1 field trip outside your pattern so weak, destiny signals cross the perceptual threshold and become actionable. Signal without novelty petrifies, novelty without signal diffuses. You hold the hinge between both. Language now carries consequence at scale, so you refine it to surgical exactness. You stop narrating difficulties as identity, I am overwhelmed, and narrate them as weather. Overwhelm is passing through. I will reduce input by 50% for 2 hours. Weather changes. Identity resists. The field listens to grammar. It routes different futures to different parts of speech. You choose verbs that move load, nouns that hold shape, adjectives that don't lie. There is a moment today when an old pattern knocks familiar, seductive, almost comforting in its ruin. You feel the throat tighten, the gaze narrow, the story spool. You do not fight the story. You step out of its grammar, You pivot into a micro-action that refuses the loop, a call you avoided, a no you owe, a walk that resets the vestibular code. Destiny is often a 3-minute behavior. You perform it before the hour turns, and the hour blooms. By evening, a hush settles over the day that is not emptiness but alignment, the quiet that follows a calibrated strike. In that hush, the loom advances again, shuttle slipping through threads with the confidence of a pattern that finally trusts its weaver. You touched matter with clean hands. Matter answered with clean outcomes. Tomorrow will not be louder. It will be truer. And when you wake, you will not ask for signs from a place of poverty. You will listen as a co-author to a book that writes you as you write it, one exact line at a time. What you stabilized in one body begins to propagate across many. Coherence wants company. At first it looks like improved logistics messages answering quickly, calendars aligning, supplies arriving without drama, but what you are seeing is a network effect, wearing ordinary clothes. Your interior timing has moved toward phase coherence, and systems around you start solving for your rhythm because resonance is cheaper than resistance. This is not charm. This is physics sliding into sociology. Oscillators like to sync. People are oscillators. You test the hypothesis without spectacle. You host meetings that begin with 30 seconds of breath, eyes lowered, jaws unhooked, spines lengthened until the vagal signal rises through the room like a tide. Heart rate variability shifts in a dozen chests at once. The social nervous system, a flocking animal, finds its shared groove. The agenda runs faster, with fewer defensive maneuvers and less semantic camouflage, not because you demanded civility, but because coherence decreases the metabolic cost of truth. People prefer low-cost truth when offered a safe container. You build the container. Psychology names the contagion you are courting emotional co-regulation, behavioral mimicry, social proof. Complex systems theory names it criticality, the moment a network crosses a threshold where small inputs drive large reorganizations. The Kuramoto model would sketch moving dots lifting into lockstep. Percolation theory would map edges going live until a giant component emerges and carries signal cheaply from one side to the other. Mystics would say a field thickens. You say the room got quiet and then precise. You are all describing the same turn. You notice different signatures of alignment at scale. Latent conflicts surface early and resolve before rot sets in. Innovation paths appear when ownership rotates in clean arcs rather than calcifying around one tongue. Deadlines become music instead of sirens. The group's collective RAS starts catching the same signals, articles, introductions, coincidences, without a master conductor. Emergence replaces management, where management once tried to compensate for incoherence. You are not abdicating leadership, you are elevating it to pattern stewardship. With scale comes hygiene. Again, you guard the network from glamour, because glamour in congregations ferments into cult dynamics. The mask is simple to spot now, worship of personality over process, secrecy sold as mystique, speed that burns rather than aerates. Precision has different markers, transparent metrics, repair rituals for inevitable human error, permissions that remain revocable, language that tolerates dissent without treating it as treason. Where precision lives, trust compounds quietly. Where glamour rules, entropy accrues interest. You choose compound trust. You introduce small, repeatable moves that push the graph toward coherence without violating free will. Micro-rituals at thresholds. The first 2 minutes of a call, the last 10 minutes of a workshop, the corridor chat that in old worlds leaked energy, and in this one gathers it. You institutionalize the daily loop state, probe, listen, adjust, commit, at team scale. The loop produces shared reality maps that are more accurate because they are co-authored under low threat. Accuracy lowers cost. Lowered cost frees resources. Free resources fund better ethics. The moral is material. Your language shifts to network grammar. You stop saying my vision and say our corridor. You stop saying alignment means agreement and say alignment means coherent difference. The loom does not weave a single color. It interlaces contrasts into tensile strength, and your job is not to flatten variance but to phase it. In practice, you ensure that dissent speaks at coherent cadence and scope. Challenge the principle in the right room. Argue the tactic on the right day. Never sabotage tempo in public because tempo is a commons. Protect the commons. On the quantum chalkboard, you begin to sense non-local coordination, arriving as clustered synchronicities across nodes you've never met. Two teams in different cities make the same leap within hours. Strangers echo the phrase you coined privately last week. A policy shifts the day your group drops an obsolete story. You are not imputing cosmic vanity. You are acknowledging that shared priors and shared affective tones produce similar measurement operations upon possibility space. So similar realities precipitate. Morphic resonance is one mythic name. Correlated inference is another. You bow to the elegance and keep building. To anchor at scale, you create artifacts that carry coherence in your absence. Documents written in clean verbs and measurable nouns. Spaces designed with light and sound that keep the nervous system out of alarm. Agreements you can read aloud without shame. Art that dignifies attention instead of harvesting it. These artifacts function like phase beacons. People phase lock to the quality embedded in them. Your influence becomes architecture, not spotlight. Architecture lasts longer. There will be tests that feel like weather fronts, pressure falling across the network at once. Old dramas attempt to re-enter through side doors, scarcity narratives, prestige hunger, zero-sum tactics. You don't sermonize. You enact the clause you agreed upon when calm. We will not bargain with noise. You reduce input for a cycle. You let latency work. You ship one honest thing. You tell the truth with receipts rather than rhetoric. Storms respect buildings that were poured plumb, and then something quiet and unmistakable occurs. The city begins to mirror not just your personal cadence, but your collective vow. Doors open for the group that would not have budged for a single will. Resources aggregate around integrity because integrity lowers transaction cost. The field prefers efficiency. You have become efficient in the moral sense. There is less waste in how you spend attention, and so there is less waste in how reality spends itself around you. In the evening, as lights come on one window at a time across the blocks, you feel a widening like the fabric under your feet is no longer a private path, but a lane others can trust without knowing your name. That is how prophecy travels when it matures, not as a personality broadcast, but as a frequency a city can host. The loom is larger than your hands now, yet it still pulls the thread you carry. You keep the thread clean. You keep the tempo honest. You let the pattern reveal a horizon you are now ready to approach together. Every living pattern earns its name when disturbed. Today, disturbance arrives to measure what you've built. It comes as a dropped thread, an ally delays, a door that should open stays inert, a number misbehaves on a screen that once felt obedient to your cadence. The old reflex rises, quick and credible. Tighten, accelerate, plead for a sign. But you do not audition for panic any longer. You remember the governance you vowed at the threshold. State first, then scope, then signal, then step. You slow the diaphragm, you widen the gaze, you lower the jaw and let the tongue rest. Biology concedes. The orchestra waits for your baton. On the quantum chalkboard, the field is testing for hysteresis, whether the system returns to coherence after being pushed, or whether the push imprints a crooked memory. Perturbation is not an insult. It is calibration. Noise enters. You learn whether your code contains redundancy, whether your corridor has error, correcting capacity. You do not attempt to erase noise. You recruit it. Stochastic resonance turns the faint instruction legible again when you add a small, chosen randomness, a different route home, a phone call to the quiet expert rather than the loud friend, but a question framed at a new temporal scale. What is true at the 90-day horizon, instead of, why did today fail me? Weak signals rise through the mix. You catch the thread without tearing fabric. Psychology offers its own language. Working memory strains under cortisol, and models degrade when surprise spikes. So you guard your variables. You refuse to narrate catastrophe while your inputs are incomplete. You reduce the problem to the smallest slice that can take a clean action today. You name the feelings without installing them as governors. Fear is present. We proceed by protocol. Affect labeled becomes affect domesticated. Domesticated affect frees cognition for design. This is not repression. It is stewardship. Networks amplify both signal and error. You protect the graph by how you carry your hour. You decline to export panic into channels that mirror it back with interest. You export precision instead. Facts, options, a time-stamped plan. Your language is cold without cruelty, warm without theater. Rooms settle because grammar settles them. Syntax is a social metronome. As the pressure persists, you observe bifurcation points, moments where the system could tip into an inferior attractor, the old basin of habit that promises relief while eroding truth. You recognize its fingerprints, binary choices where none are required, speed worship, nostalgia for identities you outgrew. You decline the counterfeit fork by making a third move that preserves dignity and data, a pause with a deadline, a prototype instead of a pitch, a conversation with the one person whose silence you feared most, conducted with your back straight and your breath generous. Entropy lowers. The attractor of coherence regains pull. Ethics again reveals itself as engineering. When resources thin, you can buy time with transparency. You tell the truth before it is demanded, and the social field pays you back with patience, because deception is expensive and honesty is low-friction currency. You refuse to shove costs downhill. You stop leakage at the source. Vague commitments, prestige bargains, optimism debt. The Loom honors such choices with unglamorous miracles. The invoice that clears in an hour, the neighbor who offers equipment, the quiet fix that prevents a public failure. Providence looks like logistics when pride is quiet. Now, a deeper silence arrives, not punitive, instructive. The signs grow sparse, not because the field has abandoned you, but because it is testing whether you have converted dependence on synchronicity into devotion to reality. Devotion remains when proof is intermittent. You keep the daily loop anyway, state, probe, listen, adjust, commit, even if the listen yields static. Static contains statistics. You log the statistics. The model updates slowly, honestly. Confidence returns not as euphoria, but as a lowered heart rate and a steady hand on the wheel. You remember phase transitions. Water holds heat invisibly before it boils. Ice absorbs warmth without melting until the latent threshold passes. Your life is holding latent heat now. Nothing seems to move because energy is reorganizing bonds. The mistake would be to crank the flame until the pot burns. The wisdom is to maintain sufficient heat for long enough without scorching the vessel. Consistency is fire with manners. Then a small symmetry appears, a line in an email that mirrors a sentence you wrote last month. A number that rounds the way your hypothesis predicted. A stranger repeating your private metaphor on a subway you almost didn't board. 3 dots, modest and precise. You feel the old impulse to demand fireworks. You don't. You let the proof remain small and sufficient. You take the next accurate action at human scale. The system appreciates being treated as a partner rather than a stagehand. By evening, perturbation has not vanished, it has integrated. The corridor did not crack under pressure, it revealed its trusses. You see where to add a beam, where to cut a decorative weight, where to widen a door for the traffic that is obviously coming. The city, sensing your refusal to dramatize, returns to its quiet choreography. The Loom advances not with fanfare, but with that low, decisive sound wood makes when it fits into joinery it was always cut to meet. You are not waiting for a sign anymore. You are making a world that needs fewer. And in the hush that follows the day's last correction, a new timbre enters the room, older, lower, unmistakable, inviting a sentence you have not yet dared to speak out loud, and a closing you have quietly been preparing to embody. You asked for signs, and the world wrote itself across your path in clean strokes. You are done pretending you cannot read. The corridor holds, not because you forced it, but because you became a shape the world could trust with consequence. Breath steadied, language sharpened, ethics learned to carry voltage without burning the hands that held it. What used to appear as accidental echoes now stands before you as an organized grammar, the syntax of a reality that answers to coherent attention and refuses the theater of panic. You know the feeling of it, the diaphragm low, the gaze wide, the mind quiet enough to perceive instruction in the ordinary. The proof has always been modest, and that is how you know it is real. So here is the final maneuver. You release bargaining. You stop asking the field to reassure you with spectacle and ask instead to be useful. Usefulness is the signature of maturity in this language. It converts private wonder into public architecture, agreements that hold, rooms that heal, sentences that do not counterfeit. You consecrate your days to precision, not performance, and the city responds by spending itself through you in ways that waste less of everyone. This is devotion without theater, prophecy without cosplay, mysticism that can invoice and deliver. You accept that guidance will sometimes arrive as silence, because silence is the only container strong enough for certain instructions. You accept that perturbations will return, not to punish, but to test tensile strength and widen your capacity. You accept that some doors will close without explanation and others will open before you feel ready. Readiness is rarely a feeling, it is a posture. You know the posture now. It looks like a jaw unclenched and a promise kept. From here your practice is simple and severe. Each morning you enact the loop state, probe, listen, adjust, commit, and you expect nothing except the chance to be exact. You let stochastic kindness thicken the field around you until other lives find their own signals more easily. You guard your speech as if contracts were being carved in stone, because in a sense they are. You decline glamour, praise, precision, and steward the corridor so others can walk without your name. And if you must ask for a sign again, you will ask with the humility of one who already knows how the loom works. You will ask for the next accurate action, not the entire map. You will ask to become the kind of presence that reduces noise wherever it stands. You will ask to be threaded where you strengthen the weave. Then you will move one clean step because the field loves a mover who doesn't make it loud. This is your closure, which is to say, your opening. You do not graduate out of humanity, you graduate into service. The pattern will keep revealing itself, not as fireworks, but as a quieter city, a truer room, a sentence you can stand inside without flinching. You, who once begged for signs, are now the legible surface reality writes upon. Walk. The corridor is listening, the loom is advancing, and the world, relieved, is ready to hear itself through you.